which wide receivers are set to go off in week 6 for fantasy football? Stick around and we'll tell you. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris. We're going to give you our wide receiver boom picks to talk about some players that we think might go off this week. All right, Chris, let's get it started. Who you like at wide receiver?
Well, I like a big bounce back this week from Christian Kirk. And look, a lot of times, you and me both, I know we like to dive into it. We like to really dissect it and really say, this is why we like the guy. Not just opinions, but this is why. The matchup, the target share, whatever, right? Really dive into it. I don't have any of that for you with Christian Kirk. I'm literally just saying, this is a gut feeling, this is how I feel, and this is why. Because number one, they haven't really involved Christian Kirk the last 2 weeks, and it hasn't worked. They've taken 2 straight losses. Number two, they're starting to hear, the chatter. Like, we got to get Christian Kirk more involved. He's got to be more involved. The squeaky wheel. And we've seen this already this year, and we've seen it in years past. When you start hearing these rumblings from the quarterback, from the coaching staff, saying, hey, yeah, we got to get Christian Kirk more involved. We got to use him more. We need him. He's our guy. We paid him a ton of money to be the guy for us. Usually what happens is that guy gets way more involved. In fact, last week, we heard it with Amari Cooper. 2 weeks ago, 1 target from Amari Cooper. Jacoby Brissett, the coach, is coming out saying, yeah, we can't just throw the ball to Amari Cooper one time. What happens last week? 12 targets. That's what I'm going with for Christian Kirk here. It's not like a matchup-driven thing. It's not a target share-driven thing. It's just a feeling that they are going to get him involved because they know they need him. He's their playmaker. He's their guy. He's their key to this offense. They're on a 2-game losing streak. They're going to do what they have to do. They're going to get him involved. I think he booms much like he did in the first 3 weeks. So don't lose faith. Put him in your lineup. I guess, trust me.
Look, we go through the numbers like you said, always try to play matchup and look at the stats, but sometimes it doesn't work out the way you think it's going to work out, right? And so I'm with you. Sometimes you go with your gut. I think that's a pretty solid pick as is. Now, on a similar note, let's go with a guy who's really been disappointing the last couple of weeks, but I feel like this might be a bounce back week for Drake London. Now, here's the thing. We do talk about this as far as the stats go with a wide receiver, chase the targets. You're going to go with a guy who at least is going to be involved in the passing game and give you a chance. Not the guy who maybe gets 1 or 2 passes thrown his way and hopefully does something, maybe scores a touchdown. You always go with the guys who are going to be a focal point to some extent of the passing game. Drake London at least has done that in every game so far this season. He's had at least 6 targets. Last week, he didn't do a lot for you, but he did get targeted 7 times, and I think better days are to come, right? Looked great his first couple of games, as did the whole Falcons offense somehow. Well, defense is adjusted. I think they'll adjust back. London is such a talented player, and he's getting the target share, but he also has that big playability where he can take a play to the house. He's got that big body, that frame where he can get those red zone targets, and they need him because, look, Kyle Pitts missed last week. Who knows about this week? The running game, they're banged up there too with no Cordero Patterson. Kind of thought London would do better last week, but it was a really tough matchup. Well, the 49ers, that is a tough matchup, but you might know that they just lost Emmanuel Mosley, starting cornerback for the season. Jimmy Ward, star safety, broken hand, out for a long time. This defense is banged up. They've been good, but not, dominant against wide receivers. This could be a get-right game for London. I think they're going to keep feeding him the ball, and he could respond in a big way. All right, let's keep going. Give me another wide receiver. Boom.
I know we both try not to pick super obvious guys on here, and to me, Marquise Brown is an obvious guy. But we have a Discord of almost 600 members now, and we get a lot of questions in there. And Marquise Brown is not an obvious guy to a lot of people because people don't seem to believe Marquise Brown is an every week must-start wide receiver. Not only is he an every week must-start wide receiver, he's an every week must-start wide receiver with tons and tons of upside. Getting double-digit targets almost every single week right now. Making plays. We already know this guy is a great playmaker. He's a big play guy waiting to happen every time he touches the ball. And now he gets a dream matchup against Seattle. Yes, the Seahawks offense has been much better than we expected. But the defense has been just as bad as we expected, maybe even worse. This defense is terrible. And that's kind of why the offense has been better, because they have to throw the ball a ton because they're always playing from behind, always having to put points on the board. It's not going to be any difference this week. Yes, the Arizona offense has struggled compared to what we're used to, but this is a gear right spot for the entire offense, for Kyler Murray, for everybody. And I think Marquise Brown in this matchup has true 30-point upside this week. He's got 3 straight 20-plus PPR games. I think he could go over 30 this week in this matchup. So I'm sure some of you are like, yeah, Marquise Brown, no doubt. But trust me, there are a lot of people who aren't sold on Marquise Brown yet. This week, he booms and leaves no doubt in anybody's mind.
Yeah, to me, Hollywood is a no doubt have to start. And it wouldn't surprise me if that Seattle-Arizona game was the highest scoring game of the week. All right, now let's go kind of obvious too. And, I don't like to go back to the well. If I've talked about a guy, who I thought would boom maybe in the last week or two, I usually try to skip him, especially if it didn't pan out. But let's go ahead and double down on Chris Godwin. He was fine last week, but they really didn't need him because it was the Lenny show. I mean, obviously against Atlanta, they just didn't need to pass a ton to the receivers. And for some reason, they just were passing a ton to Fournette. But look, they might not need to pass a ton against Pittsburgh, but they still will because that's what Tom Brady does. He doesn't care. And Pittsburgh, this defense just got shredded by Buffalo. I think they get shredded by Tampa as well. Look, without Watt, it's pretty clear this defense is mediocre at best. All right, and that's being kind. So you might say, well, maybe they, stats are skewed because of this one game against Buffalo. Not really. Look, in all but one game so far this season, wide receivers, meaning the wide receiver core for a team, has gone over 170 yards in each game. The only time they didn't against Pittsburgh was when it was Cleveland. All right, and they don't even have a wide receiver core. They have Amari Cooper, right, with Jacoby Brissett passing to him. I'm pretty sure in Tampa, you're going to see a big game from Mike Evans and a big game from Chris Godwin. So let's go ahead and run it back and call the boom. Maybe this is the week Chris Godwin gets in the end zone and has a monster week. All right, one more wide receiver that you're loving.
This one might be obvious because he's coming off a huge game, and usually that's all it takes for people, right? Had a big game, got to start him, and that's Gabriel Davis, or Gabe Davis, I guess now. And I think he's going to run it back. You talk about Chris Godwin. I think Gabe Davis is going to run it back with another huge game because it's the Chiefs. And 2 things here. Number 1, the Chiefs defense, not very good, especially not very good against wide receivers. They give up big plays, to everybody, and there's no reason to think Gabe Davis can't hit on a big play. And of course, the other reason is that's what he does, right? This is a guy, I don't know if he's going to be able to do this all year. He's really testing the analytical limits of fantasy football. 2 catches and he scores 30 fantasy points, right? 3 catches and gets 20 fantasy points. It makes no sense what Gabriel Davis is doing, but you know what? Don't question it. Just go with it, especially this week against the Chiefs, because it's a dream spot for a guy like Gabriel Davis, because this isn't a spot where he needs a huge target share, because just like we saw last week, he only needs 1 or 2 big plays against this defense in this matchup, and he can have a huge game. Oh, and what happened the last time they played the Chiefs in the playoffs last year? 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying he's going to do that, but he has probably has the biggest upside of any wide receiver this week on the entire slate. So Gabriel Davis, if you've got him, obviously you played him last week, you feel good. I know some people did have him on their bench. They don't feel too good, but don't worry. You get a second chance this week. Put him in no matter what.
It's funny. You almost have to wonder with being the Chiefs, are they going to pay more attention to him than Diggs this week? You don't think that they could get burned again, right? All right, and then let's end with a guy who also is coming off a big week in week 5, but maybe you didn't even notice because he's on the Patriots. I'm talking about Jakobi Meyers, a guy that really was kind of forgotten about because, look, he missed the last 2 weeks with injury, and he was questionable heading into this week. So a lot of people, even if you had him on a roster, probably didn't play him. But you should have because he was going against Detroit. So, look, we know Detroit is clearly, if not the worst, one of the worst defenses in the league. So putting up 111 yards against Detroit, maybe not a big deal. But this is not out of the blue for him. Look, back in week 2, last time Jakobi Meyers had played, he went for 95 yards. And this is a guy that over 3 games that he's played, 27 targets. I just talked about chasing the targets. This guy is a target magnet. Okay, he's clearly the number 1 guy in New England. And maybe you don't get excited about Patriots receivers, and that's fair enough. But when a guy is that clearly the number one guy and he's getting such a consistent target share, you have to pay attention. And this matchup really isn't that bad either. You got Cleveland on the docket. You know what? That defense has been inconsistent at best. Worse on the ground, defensively, but not great either against stopping wide receivers. So I don't think it really even matters if Mac Jones comes back or not, because you just saw with Bailey Zappi, he put up 111 yards. I feel really good about Myers. I think he has another solid week. All right, now you know which wide receivers we think will break out in week 6. We got you covered as far as running back booms, start sit advice, everything you need to set those winning lineups. Check out our playlist for week 6 right here and keep it going with all the best fantasy advice.